Today we're going to discuss several items. First, we're continuing the subject of the Mishnah. If chametz, leavened bread that pass the time of Passover, if it belongs to a fellow Jew versus if it belongs to a non-Jew, where, when and how someone allowed or not allowed to use it. Another issue we're going to discuss, time allow, is a promissory note, which means if an item will lead to a financial loss, and if that item destroy, let's say if you have a promissory note or something that will have a value in the future. So basically the question is, do we treat it as though it has a monetary value or not? So for example, if a person damages or destroys such an item, is he obligated or not obligated to reimburse its owner for the loss? So again, just part of our discussion. We are page 29 in Tractate Pesachim. 13 lines from the bottom of the page, Kaftet 29. והדר בי רב אחא בר יעקב מההי. Since we said in the Mishnah, in Kafchet Amud Aleph 28a, so we said that chametz that belongs to a non-Jew, it's not an issue after Passover. You're allowed to derive benefit. If it's from a fellow Jew, it's forbidden. So we understand chametz literally, just chametz. Now, for example, you have people who are very scrupulous with chametz. So when it's past the time of Passover, if you have, for example, let's say you have a kemach, you have a dough, and it passed Passover. So people sometimes are careful not to touch it. So there is sometimes a special sticker, a special note that said kemach shenitchan achrei Pesach, which means if that kemach, that flour, did not combine with water, therefore you can grind it after Passover and then you can use it. So here, so far, we have the two extremes, which means, originally speaking, we have Rav Acha bar Yaakov, his name of one sage, that he holds the same as Rabbi Yehuda, that said, since the Torah tells us Velo yera'eh lecha chametz, you should not have a chametz, leavened bread, in your meats. So he said that applies specifically to chametz that belong to a fellow Jew. Now, you remember Rashi said yesterday that applies even to eat chametz and Pesach that belong to a non-Jew. Tosfot said that apply only to deriving benefit. But after Passover, you're allowed to eat it, which is in a way extreme point of view. Then you have the other extreme point of view, which is Rava that learned according to Rabbi Shimon, and he said that since the Torah tells us lo ye'achel, that applies not only to chametz that belong to a fellow Jew, that's also the chametz that belong to a non-Jew. And he said even it's crossed the time of Pesach, you are still forbidden from eating it. And we said yesterday that you go to the extreme with malkot, etc. So you see here two extremes. But we are not, as we said yesterday, we are not in a final halakha. So here the Gemara said, guess what? You know what happened? Rav Acha bar Yaakov retracted his position. He changed his mind. Which means he changed his mind from the idea that Rabbi Yehuda did not forbid chametz of a non-Jew that crossed the time of Passover. Now he is going to bring us a proof to that. דתניא, האוכל חמץ של הקדש במועד מעל, ויש אומרים לו מעל. Here is typical Talmudic discussion. You have one dogma of discussion, and then it looks like you digressing, but it's not, because it's part of the general discussion. Here we talk about something that is sanctified. Simple example. Imagine if, let's say, Elliot decided tomorrow to contribute his car to hospital, to yeshiva, to synagogue. That car is no longer his. It's called Hekdesh. It belongs to the institution. So let's trace for our understanding the time of the temple, and then we understand that it's not only temple, but we derive the point. If you have something that belongs to the temple that contain chametz, contain leavened bread, if it's belong to Hekdesh, like sacred, so therefore it's Hekdesh. It's not mine, it's not yours, it's not belong to anybody. Now, a fellow, let's call him a name, Reuven, he comes in, and what did he do? He ate chametz that belongs to Hekdesh, that is belong to something that is sacred. So here you have a disputation between rabbis, that one said it's considering as someone who's ma'al, guilty of misuse a consecrated item, and the other one said no, he is not guilty for misuse a consecrated item. So let's dig in. If you tell me that this chametz belongs to a consecrated entity, so therefore it's forbidden to derive any benefit. So in that sense, it doesn't have any value. In order to be in violation, for example, stealing, you need to steal shve pruta, you need to steal something in order to be in violation that carries value. In order to marry, you need to have a ring, carries value. So in order to be in violation of misuse a consecrated item, you need to be in violation. Here, anchovy is no violation, because since it belongs to a consecrated item, and the Hekdesh lo ifsid, the consecrated entity not lost anything, because it's forbidden from deriving any benefit. So if someone misuse something that it belongs to a consecrated, so you need to bring a sacrificial offering of guilt, it's called me'ilah, like misusing. Also he needs to repay the Hekdesh, the consecrated entity, whatever involved, in addition 1/5, but which means that it's about a 25% of the value of that item. But here you have, let's understand, let's say you have a bread that Mr. A contributed to an entity. It's now consecrated. Someone else, Mr. Reuven, come in and he ate it on Passover. So does he need to bring a sacrificial offering for misuse a consecrated item or not? So here you see one opinion that he said it happens on Passover. On Passover it's not belong to you, right? So since it not belong to you, so you have not any violation, it's not misuse of anything. The other one said no, he is in a violation. Why he is in a violation? Because they said that it's still an issue. Let's see, you have here both Rashi and Tosfot. Rashi said, "V'ta'ut hu ze degabei chametz mezidu v'gabei hekdesh shogegu." Rashi said, guess what? Don't fall to that trap thinking that nothing happened here. He says, if a person eat chametz on Passover that belonged to hekdesh, he did it intentionally. So therefore, he created a loss, monetary loss of the hekdesh. So why? Because guess what? If it stay by the hekdesh, if it passed the time of Passover, let's say if the person did not eat that bread, and now Passover is over, the treasurer who in charge of the consecrated entity can go ahead and sell that item, that bread, that whiskey, whatever it is, to a fellow Jew. It's not a problem, it's past Passover, it not belong to anybody. So that's one school of thought. Tosfot tells us, soon you see, that he said that Rabbi Nechunya he said, he followed Masechet Makot that said, Chayaveh mitot shogegim, it's kimlei. So let's see first what's involved, because you have here 5 different Tanaic, different opinion what's involved. Man yesh omrim. To whom is this phrase? Some say, which means we have here an opinion. Tosfot said that it's Rabbi Natan's, usually it's Rabbi Meir, that this disputation apply in a 5 different directions, 5 different ways to understand it. First one, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Nechunya ben Akanai, דתניא רבי נחוניה בן הקנה היה עושה את יום הכיפורים כשבת לתשלומים. מה שבת מתחייב בנפשו הוא פטור מן התשלומים. אף יום הכיפורים מתחייב בנפשו הוא פטור מתשלומים. Beautiful. I'm going now by the direction of Rashi and Tosfot. Yom Kippur. He treated Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the same as Shabbat. Which means if someone did the type of labor, so he is in violation. It's called karet. The Torah said that soul shall be cut off. Karet. Now, there is a concept that we learn many times. It's called kimlei bederabba minei. Meaning, if someone deserves a death penalty, and also he involved with something that needs to pay a monetary payment, which means you have someone that he is a murderer and he's a thief. He stole $10,000, but he also deserved execution. So we hold that since the court rules that that person deserves execution, he is free from any payment. You remember we studied it? Mm-hmm. An example, let's say if you have a simple case, you have an ox that killed people, and that ox, the owner brought before the court, rabbinic court, and the rabbi said, stone him. You have to stone that ox. He has damage to people, he cannot be among the living. Now, meanwhile, can the owner go ahead and sell that ox? No. Why not? Because the owner may say, wait a second, this ox created also damage, and I want to pay the people, so let me sell that ox and get the money and pay the people. What we said? We said, since the Bet Din already ruled that this ox deserve execution, so we go and say that no one can buy it. There is an opinion as a side note that in that case sometimes you can sell it for a non-Jew, but that's a side note. The key point is kimlei bederabba minei. You go by the biggest punishment. Now, if we go to our subject, what happened here? Think together with me, and I'm going now in the direction of Rashi and Tosfot. They tells us, listen carefully what happened here. If someone eat chametz that belong to Hekdesh, belong to a consecrated entity, so let's think together. Is he in violation of eating chametz on Passover? What do you think? Yes. So since the Torah tells us that someone who violated that commandment, that soul shall be cut off. So therefore, you have here already the severe punishment. You do not ask him to pay for misuse a consecrated item. Why? Because he already in the highest punishment. You may say, wait a second, this is bidei shamayim, this by the heavenly court. But it's still, if you follow the Torah, it means you have a wire, and the wire cut. Once I asked, when I was a kid, I asked my Rebbe, what does that mean, that soul shall be cut off? So he showed me electrical wires, and he explained to me, imagine that wire's cut. Somebody cut the wire. So there's no connections. So anyway, it's severe punishment. It's a very strong punishment. So therefore, here is an opinion that said, if that's the case, you don't ask him to pay or to bring an offering for misuse a consecrated item. So therefore, he is free. But he's free in our language via negativa. Now, we say that that's one opinion. Second one, Rav Yosef Amar. Is everyone with me?
Yeah.
Rav Yosef Amar, בפודין את הקודשים להאכילן לכלבים כמפלגי. Which means, here we talk about someone who ate a consecrated item, that you cannot redeem that item in order to eat it. So the question is, you thought that maybe I redeem that money and feed the dogs. So Rav Yosef hold that according to those who say that chametz during the Pesach forbidden to drive benefit, which is both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, remember that from yesterday? Therefore, there is no monetary value of chametz in Passover, which means one who ate chametz in Pesach did not in violation of misuse. Now, even according to Rabbi Shimon that said, wait a second, if Passover is over, you can go ahead, take that item, redeem that chametz and eat it. But during Passover, that's the key point, during the festival of Passover, there is no monetary value, because in our simple language it's not yours. So man de amar ma'al, the first one who said that he is in a violation of misuse, which is the first one, kasavar podin et hakodashim le'achilan leklavim. He hold that one may redeem consecrated items in order to feed the dogs. So what we understand, so since you can do it, you can take the leaven, the chametz, that belong to a consecrated entity on Pesach. That's, remember Rabbi Yossi Aglili that said that during the Pesach chametz you're allowed to derive benefit. So therefore there is a monetary value of that chametz that the persons ate. Uman de amar lo ma'al kasavar en podin. And he said, the one who hold that the person did not misuse consecrated item, he hold that consecrated property may not be redeemed for the purpose. Which means you cannot go ahead and feed the dogs with this, and therefore that chametz has no monetary value on Pesach. Now Rav Acha Barava bring another version of the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, and he said as follows: Rav Acha Barava Tanale. So 29b, the top of the page, Lehashma'ata Mishmei de Rav Yosef Behalishna. So he learned this idea, this notion, this halacha, in name of Rav Yosef, the following language: Dekule alma ein podim et hakodashim la'achilam leklavim. That everyone said that you cannot redeem the chametz, which means you can take this consecrated item, and imagine you in charge for the kodashim, for something that is consecrated, and you said, this is chametz, I'm not comfortable. Even it's not belong to you. You are only the gabbai, the person in charge. So guess what you said? You said, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take this. Today is a Chol HaMoed, is intermediary days of Pesach. I'm going to take this box of whiskey, and I'm going to do what? To sell it. Or I'm going to take this bread, and I'm going to feed my dog. So, meaning, since the gabbai cannot do that, why? Because you cannot have any use of that chametz in Pesach. So even it's not yours per se, but since you're in charge, you cannot actively go ahead and not only not selling it, but not even feeding the dogs with that. So therefore, in that mindset, listen to me carefully, therefore at that period, during Passover, there is no value. There's no value. You can't do anything. You cannot feed the dogs. You cannot sell it. So therefore, he said, and that's basically, I'm following the way that the Ravid, the great rabbi on the Rambam, explained it. So he said, "V'hacha behaka miflegi." So this is the real disputation. Bedavar hagoremem lemamon kemamon dami. You remember in the introduction of this shiur, I told you that there is a concept that's called an item that can cause a financial loss. So we hold that something that creates a financial loss, it's not so simple if it's considering the same or not, because it's indirect. Remember we talk about a person damage or destroy an item, for example, an item that will lead to a financial loss if we destroy. Take for example a promissory note or something that will have a value in the future. So here the opinion is the machloket, the disputation, if it's considering the same value as a money or not. Man דאמר מעל כסבר דבר הגורם לממון כממון דמי. The one who said that misuse a consecrated property by what? By using consecrated leavened bread doing Pesach, he hold that there is a monetary value of that consecrated property on Pesach, because guess what? You can wait after Pesach and sell it and use that money. So therefore it's cause to have a money in the future. Even at this very moment you don't have money, but has a monetary value. Imagine for example you have a note. So you have a note from someone who's no longer among the living. So you can take the note to the children, and sometimes even in nowadays you have a personal note. Let's say Mr. Reuven gave to Mr. Shimon a $5,000 loan, and Mr. Reuven Mr. Shimon passed away. And now, a couple of years later, Mr. Reuven, what did he do? He take that note to Mr. Shimon's children. Now, you can say that they may challenge that, but if they recognize that that's the handwriting of the father, so sometimes even without court, they recognize that and they pay Reuben the $5,000. Why? Because they have the note. Is that clear?
Yes.
So it means even just by having this little piece of paper, it sometimes carries a value even at this very moment has no value. Imagine, for example, if Shimon passed and his child, who may owns a lot, he is 5 years old. So Reuben needs to wait until this child reaches the maturity in order to use that promissory note. Correct? Mm-hmm. So they have a monetary value that you may not use at this very moment. So therefore, they said, since after Passover you can go ahead and use that chametz, that consecrated chametz, therefore it carries as equal as cash. That's one opinion. The other one, uman de amar lo ma'al, and the one who said that it's not in violation of misuse a consecrated property, kasavar davar gorem lemamon lav kemamon dami. He said, wait a second, we judge the circumstance according to the accurate moment. And since we are dealing here and we're zooming in the time of the festival of Passover, and during the Passover, this chametz, this leavened bread, carries no value, so therefore a person that used that, let's say if someone ate that bread during Passover, so as far as misuse a consecrated property, he is not in violation. In regard to your question, so what happened here, Talmudic process of learning is a discussion, and sometimes the discussion go further. We're not yet in the final halachot. One of the things that David likes so much here is that we have at the end a final halachot, practical halachot, but we are not there yet. You remember the speaker on Sunday, one of the right things he said is that the Talmud maintain a lot of discussions, and by not all mean not the same values of a final halachot, because there are different books for the code. They have many halachot, but you have some pages that is not a practical halachot. So back to our subject, if people does all kind of crazy things, for sure later in halachot we see that it's all in violation. But here we're dealing with theoretical issues, and theoretical issue we just need to go to the mindset of all of that. And in the mindset you see so far two extremes opinions. Mm-hmm. And therefore we need to see what's the outcome. So here you see how Rav Acha Bar Yaakov totally backed out and changed direction. So Rav Acha Bar Yaakov אמר, דכולי עלמא דבר הגורם לממון כממון דמי. So it means that some item that belong to a consecrated hekdesh, it's considering something that carries a monetary value. Why? Because remember, after Passover you can sell it. So therefore, if someone ate it during Passover, he is in violation of misuse a consecrated property. So remember, we have here two entities, but they intermingle each other. One is the issue of chametz, leavened bread, before, middle, and after Passover, and we explained that during Passover it's forbidden for both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. But here we're dealing with chametz that not belong to the owner; it belongs to hekdesh. And now we enter to other question, which is, since it's forbidden to derive benefit, so therefore, if he is in violation of misuse a consecrated property, which is another subject. But here you see how he ended by saying V'hacha biflugta de Rabbi Yehuda veRabbi Shimon kamiflegid. Now we enter the domain of the disputation we mentioned earlier. That chametz, that avar alav Pesach, that passed the Passover. In other words, this is a leavened bread that crossed the time of Passover. It's forbidden to derive benefit. Man de'amar lo ma'al ki Rabbi Yehuda. The one who said that he's not in violation of misuse, he holds the same as Rabbi Yehuda. What Rabbi Yehuda tells us? That chametz that crossed the time of Passover is what? Forbidden. So if it's forbidden, if we go back, we trace back, that chametz during Passover carries no value because it's belonged to a consecrated hekdesh, and therefore is no value neither on Pesach nor after Pesach, because you cannot derive any benefit from that. It's past Passover, but it's still considered chametz she'avar alav Pesach, that it crossed the time of Passover. So since is no value, a person who uses it, he is not in violation of misuse a consecrated property. Versus uman de'amar ma'al ke Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon, what did he say? He said that chametz, if it's Pesach, it's past, we cross the time of Pesach, you can go ahead and eat it. So since you're allowed to eat it, so therefore, if you go back the time of Passover, it's considering what is promissory note, gorem lemamon, because even now it's Passover, but later after Passover it carries, right? So therefore, if someone eat it, what happened here is also in violation of misuse the consecrated property. So the Gemarrah said, "V'ha Rav Acha bar Yaakov hu de'amar de Rabbi Yehuda yalif seor de'achila mi seor de'riyah." I said, wait a second, we have a challenge what you said. Isn't Rav Acha bar Yaakov that said that Rabbi Yehuda derived the details of the prohibition against eating leaven from the detail of the prohibition against seeing leaven? Which means, we said, we compare. We said the same as permitted to see leavened bread of a non-Jew. Okay? So the same here, or something that belonged to hekdesh, consecrated. So it the same way is permitted to eat this type of leavened bread after Pesach. So what we understand? So consecrated leavened bread will be permitted after Passover, even according to Rabbi Yehuda. So he said, so why he said that they carry no value, that there is no shovi, that it is nothing? It is. So he said here, soon we see what's the bottom line. Ela hadar beravacha veYaakov me'ayin. That's very important. You have to say that he backed off. So he said that Rabbi Yehuda forbids all different leaven, any type that derive benefit from the Torah, regardless if it belongs to a non-Jew or belongs to a hekdesh, to consecrated, regardless if it's during Pesach or after Pesach. So you see, he goes to the extreme. Now we go to the last way of understanding. Rav Ashi Amar, the kule alma ein podin. He says that everyone agrees that you cannot take this consecrated item and feed the dogs with them. Why? V'davar hagorem lemamon lav kemamon dami. So here you have a Rashi, and I'm just going the way that I explained in my book on Rashi. Rashi said as follows: כלומר, דכולי עלמא לנוכרי לא מזבנין עלי בפסח. So, the Rishonim, you have here the Tosfot Harashba, Tosfot Reed, they said דכולי עלמא פודין, which means everyone agreed that you cannot do any business transactions with this on Pesach. So here you have in one hand a concept that is called bizayon kodashim. You take something that is consecrated and you basically redeem it. You use it. So the big problem is that yes, we know that after Pesach you can do something, but now doing the Pesach, it's not carries any value. So the key point here, I'll just give you the abbreviation. I see we're running out of time. The key point is that it's like a promissory note. That now what happened here, it's like you carry those, those bond that you can redeem in who knows. So someone give you something that, let's say if you are 70 years old and someone give you a promissory note that you can redeem in a 60 years, 55 years from now, when you will be 125. So in one hand you said that it's some note. On the other hand, if it's solely for you, it maybe has no value. Why? Because you cannot redeem it, because the chances for you to live in 125 are very tiny. Okay? Now, back to our subject. Here we said that it's happened during Pesach, right? So it happens during Pesach, you cannot do much with this. But let's face it, after Pesach, it carries something. So here we enter the domain of belief, what Rav Ashi said, everyone agreed. That's my set, Rav Ashi said. That guess what's happening here? Since it's consecrated property, you cannot redeem it for simple reason, because I don't hold that the fact that after Pesach I can redeem it, it carries something. I zoom in at the current situation. The current situation is no value, forget it. So it's no value. V'hacha biflugta de Rabbi Yossi Aglili v'Rabbanan kamifligi. Here we enter to a domain of machloket, of disputation between the sages and Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Man de'amar ma'al keRabbi Yossi, uman de'amar lo ma'al keRabbanan. The one who said that one is in a violation of misuse a consecrated property, he hold that chametz, leavened bread, you allowed to use it. You remember yesterday the Rashi that said that you can use it even to drive benefit, mutar b'ana'ah, Tosfot said, right? Even during Pesach. That's Rabbi Yossi Aglili. So therefore, that leavened bread, that chametz, carries a monetary value during Pesach. So even you cannot use it to feed the dogs, but you can, for example, use selling that chametz and take that money, buy wood to heat something, to heat the food, etc. So, and the other one, they say that it's not in violation of misuse. So he hold the same as Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, that chametz during Passover you cannot derive any benefit, and therefore you cannot derive benefit from the moment that you burn the chametz. So therefore, during Passover, that chametz carries no monetary value, nothing. Amar Rav. Now we going to another subject that relate to the ta'arovot, and we discussed ta'arovot several times in the past several days, which is mixing two items. Some introduction. Take a bread and you put the bread in a pot of meat. Couple of hours pass by. What happened to that slice of bread? Goodbye.
Goodbye, destroy.
Right? It's just, what happened? It's just get in that cooking stuff, and you can ask Helen, she will tell you, right? And then goodbye. Correct? Now, there is a concept that's called min bemino, min sheno bemino, which means if you have, for example, wine with water, so a small amount of water with the wine doesn't change it much, right? But bread with meat, change. Now let's see what's involved here. אמר רב חמץ בזמנו, בין במינו בין שלא במינו אסור, שלא בזמנו במינו אסור, שלא במינו מותר. So Rav said, imagine that you have a leavened bread. Leavened bread mix with something that is permitted food. So here, during the 7th day of Pesach, leavened bread is forbidden regardless that it mix with its type or not. For example, if you have a leavened flour mixed with matzah flour, or unleavened matzah mixed with leavened matzah, okay? So, or if mixed with another type of substance. So you see here, but not during its time, it's prohibited. But we said after Pesach, if it's mixed with its own type of substance, so then it's prohibited. But if it's mixed with another type, it's permitted. What does that mean? Because there is a concept that's called batel berov. You remember we discussed the other day about basar bechalav. If you have a large pot of meat and someone dropped a little small tiny drop of milk in, so it's considering what? Batel berov, because it's mixed with another large type of another substance. So here we said, if it's the same one, the same category, it's a problem. But if not, b'may askina. Let's zoom in and said, ileima benoten tam. If we're talking about that this chametz, this leavened bread, does what? It gives the flavor to the mixture. Which means, you remember that we talk about 160? Let's say if you have a meat and you have a drop of milk, or let's say a slice of yellow cheese, get in. So you have to measure. And we said by 1 of 60. Remember that? So if it's 1 of 60, so the key point is, it changed the taste, it changed the flavor, it's now different or not. שלא בזמנו, שלא במינו מותר. So you tell me not during its time and mix with another type of substance, why is permitted? Haya hiv tama. It's giving a change the taste in the mixture. Ela b'mashehu, which means this is a small, tiny type.
Can you explain the difference between batel b'shishim and batel b'rov?
Okay, excellent. Batel b'shishim, which means literally, you have, for sure we have to go by measurement, but it's a good question. Let's say you take out the net meat. You squeeze, imagine that you squeeze all the liquid out. You take the net meat, and then you measure the other part, let's say the milk. And if it's below than 160, we say that whatever the milk within the meat, it's swallowed in such a level that it's not carries its taste. Okay?
Right.
That's considering a batel b'shishim, because it's below than 160. Batel berov, which means if you take a piece of bread and you combine it with a large amount of meat, as we said earlier, that bread disappears. Which means batel barov, it's nullified by the majority, which is the meat. So in that sense, in our simple language, the meat swallow it, and it doesn't resonate anything there.
It's fine.
It's fine in that case. But we go now to deeper, and we said chametz bizmano, ben bemino, ben shelo bemino, asur. We said if any amount, if we said, for example, you have here 11 bread during the time of the time that is forbidden. So he said, whether it's mixed with its own type of substance or another type of substance, it's forbidden. Why? Rav letame, Rav have the explanation. The Rav u'Shmuel da'amre tavayu kol isurim shebatorah, any prohibited part of the Torah, במino במשהו שלא במינו בנותן טעם. So if it's involved with its own type, so it's even with any amount of the prohibited substance, rather the entire mixture prohibited. But other than that, it's another type. It's one is it gives some flavor. If it changes the taste in to the mixture, so then it's different. So an example, let's say wine and water. Wine and water, as long as you have ta'am, as long as you have a taste, so what happened? It's lo batel, it's not nullified. But if that ta'am is over, that taste is over, so you can use it. So Rabbi Yehuda said, min bemino lo batel olam. Rabbi Yehuda hold that min with the same one never change, because it's the same one. The sages said, and it's basically, we don't have time, but the Ran said in Nedarim, page 32, explained this point of the sages. He said, in Nedarim 52, he says that there is a concept that's called hashpa'ah, which means influence. And influence not only apply to people, apply also to food. Steve is not here, but you can ask him. He is the chef, right? So sometimes there is an influence of certain food, even a small amount, to the entire food. In other words, if you put certain type of food and influence the other part to make the taste according to that food. So sometimes you take even a small amount of food and it changes the whole taste. Okay? So he said, as long as it carries the influence, then we have these issues. But if it's no longer, so it's not. So if it's a slice of bread in a meat, so it's nothing. But other than that, it's carries stronger and stronger. Sometimes you take even spices and change the whole taste of the food. So he said here as follows: Rav gazar chametz bizmano shelo bemiно, atu mino ושלא בזמנו במינו אסור כרבי יהודה, ושלא במינו מותר, ושלא בזמנו ושלא במינו אתו מינו כולי לא גזרינן. So Rav basically rendered a decree that anything that is prohibited, like prohibited leavened bread during the time of prohibition, so if it mixed with another type of food, so it's only applied to its own type. But if it's not during the time and it mixed with its own type of substance, so Rabbi Yehuda said that leavened bread is forbidden even after Pesach, and therefore that mixture is forbidden. And now if it's mixed with another type of substance, then it's permitted, because there is no need to go so far to any degree with some mixture of another type if it's not during the time. ושמואל אמר, חמץ בזמנו במינו אסור, שלא במינו מותר. שלא בזמנו במינו ושלא במינו מותר. Shmuel said, if it's leavened bread, it's in time, it mixed with something that it's not in his type, so it's forbidden even to bring any type of taste with that. But if it's different type, and it's not changed the taste, so it's not an issue. But now if it's crossed the time of Passover, so if it's after Passover, he said, regardless if it's on or not it's on, it's fine. חמץ בזמנו במינו אסור, שמואל לטעמי, דרב ושמואל דאמרת רביו כל איסורים שבתורה במינו אסור במשהו שלא במינו ונותן טעם. So he said, so the both Rav and Shmuel hold that any food that prohibited by the Torah that become mixed with permitted food, if the permitted food in its own type such that it's impossible to distinguish one from the other, the mixture in such a level that you don't recognize the difference between the two, then even any amount of the prohibition substance render the entire mixture prohibited. However, if the prohibited food is mixed with another type of substance, then the mixture becomes prohibited only when there is enough of the forbidden item to give flavor to the mixture. And he said, שלא במינן, עטו מינן לא גזר. שלא בזמנו, בין במינן, בין שלא במינן מותרים, כרבי שמעון. So he said, what?
How often does this happen where in reality you have to throw out a whole pot? Is that something that's commonly happened in nowadays?
I will say this, yes and no. Because the big question, I'll give you an example. You have sometimes a production of masses. You're making a mass production of food. You're a big contractor, big caterer business. So sometimes you need to measure. If you have one of the employee who's not familiar, who's not Jewish or not familiar, mix something. We gave yesterday an example, right? The guy went to a burger or McDonald's, right, and a Wendy, and he brought a tray, and he mixed it with a large part of kosher meat. You have to measure it. And you may say, wait a second. Imagine you have, let's exaggerate, say you have a rabbinic convention. You have 100 rabbis come to a convention. You have a big, large part of meat that's worth, who knows, maybe thousands of dollars. And now this guy, this non-Jewish guy, let's call him Jose, the Puerto Rican, right? He put this a sandwich, right? How do you call it? Bacon, whatever. Bacon. Sandwich, right? Inside that pot. So think together with me, if in mixture and is a small slide, right? It's an issue or it's not an issue?
Yes.
It's not so simple to say it is issue. It's not so simple because maybe it's batel b'shishim.
It might be 1/60th. It might
be lower than 1/60.
Well, but you said bacon.
So
bacon
the answer is the bacon you cannot. But let's say if it's ham,
we cannot eat it.
It's not so simple. Let's say if it's a chicken.
Okay.
Let's go by the simple way.
All
chicken.
Right.
Okay? Let's say it's a small slice of chicken. The fellow bought a sandwich with chicken from Wendy. That is totally treif. Okay? He wants to heat it. He put it in a pot. You walk in, you cut in, boom. He left it inside the pot. It mixed with the entire pot. And you cannot recognize anything. What do you do now? So if you measure and it's below than 160, you can say that it's not an issue. Now you come to me and says, wait a second. Each rabbi in these 100 rabbis get in his plate a portion of that. And it may be that you're serving someone with something that is totally treif. The answer is, by halacha, the moment we say that it's batel b'shishim, that it's combined with the 160, so then the entire pot judged by a pot.
Right.
I meant, if you want to go extra mile, said, forget it, that's different. But basically, by halacha, okay?
It's okay, so it's fine.
Yeah, because
it depends in a case.
Because only a small amount.
60th, it's less.
It depends in the 60, as I said, you need to determine every case. That's the reason why you need to have a mashgiach that's very familiar.
But if it's determined that it is less than...
So then you can go ahead and use it.
Yeah.
But I gave you an example yesterday that even the largest pot, the biggest pot, right? They have who knows how many a pound of meat, and you have a little fly, small tiny fly, flew in dead, and not just that. You take your spoon, you pull it out. The halakha tells us that what? Even 1 to 1,000, you have to throw out the entire pot.
Right.
Why would
not just that, you cannot give it to Anthony next door.
Why with the fly? Because it's a dead animal.
Dead creature.
Dead creature.
Afilu be'elef lo batel.
Yeah, it's
right?
different. It's
famous mechaber. Okay, So now we go to the third one by Rabbi Yochanan. ורבי יוחנן אמר חמץ בזמנו, בין במינו, בין שלא במינו, אסור בנותן טעם, שלא בזמנו, בין במינן, בין שלא במינן, מותר. So Rabbi Yochanan said with regard to 11 bread that falls into a mixture during its time of prohibition, whether it's mixed with its own type of substance or another type of substance, it becomes prohibited only when there is enough of the forbidden item to give the flavor, to give the taste of the mixture. But not during this time of prohibition, and for example after Pesach, it's always permitted regardless whether it's mixture with its own type or for a mixture of another type, not the issue. Now we elaborate to that. חמץ בזמנו בין מינו שלא מינו נותן טעם, רבי יוחנן לטעמי, רבי יוחנן וריש לקיש דאמרי תוויו, כל איסורים שבתורה בין מינם שלא מינם נותן טעם, שלא בזמנו בין מינו שלא מינו מותרים כרבי שמעון. So basically they hold, both Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, that they said all the prohibited item of the Torah, if fall into a mixture, whether it's on type or another type, it's prohibited in a time or not, it's permitted. Why? Because we go by Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon, what he hold? That leavened bread owned by a Jew during Passover, if it's past the Passover, it's not prohibited afterwards. Page 30, now we go to a halacha, a marava, and that's in a way rarely happens. Page 30, Amarava hilcheta. Rava said the halacha is regard to prohibition against eating mixture. חמץ בזמנו, בין במינו, בין שלא במינו, אסור במשהו, כרב, שלא בזמנו, בין במינו, בין שלא ממותר, כרבי שמעון. He said, leavened bread during its time, if it's mixed with its own type or with another type, it's prohibited even if any amount become a mix. That's the opinion of Rab. But not during its time of prohibition, mixed with its own type with another type, it's permitted, even when it gives flavors to the mixtures. That's the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. So the Gemarrah asks, if that's the case, wait a second, you tell me that? We just said in the previous page, V'amar Rabba in 29, Rabbi Shimon knasa kanis. We said that we put a fine against this guy, they will put imposing a penalty, because guess what, this fellow Jew used a chametz on Passover, so we put, he is in violation. The Torah said you should not be seen and should not be found, so you should forbid this type of chametz, regardless if it's chametz or mixture. So they said, Hanemile be'einei. This penalty applies only to leavened bread that it's in pure, unadulterated form. For its regard to a mixture, aval alidei ta'arovet, lo. No, because one does not impose a penalty even though the leavened bread is still extant. ואז דרבה לטעמי, just let's finish, דאמר רבה, כי אבינו ברב נחמן, כי אבנף כשיבה יום עד פסחא. So when I went to the great sage Rav Nachman and we passed the time of 7 days of Passover, it's not necessarily 7 because it was in Babylon that they said the 8, but the Rashash explained it. Anyway, so he said, Amar lan, Puku uzvinu chamira devnei chela. He says, go and buy for a bread that made per what? From the non-Jew. So they bake it on that day, which is the last day of Pesach. So based on that story, what we understand, that he maintained that one may eat leavened bread that was owned by a non-Jew doing Passover. So now we're going to a practical halachot. First halacha is the Shulchan Aruch Choshen Mishpat 386, an item that will lead to financial loss if destroyed, such as promissory note, remember we discussed it today, or something that will have value in the future, like the note, it is treated as though it has a monetary value. So consequently, if a person damages or destroys such an item, is obligated to reimburse its owner for its loss. We talk also about ta'arovot, That Shulchan Aruch Yoredea 98. Most items prohibited by the Torah, with certain notable exceptions, are nullified once they fall into a mixture, as long as they not give a flavor to it, which is precise in a sense as the 1 part in 60. These apply both when the mixture is in the same type as prohibited item or it's a different type, as the halacha going by Rabbi Yochanan ben Lakish when they disagree with Rabbi Shmuel. Now we also discuss ta'arovet chametz. This is Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 447. During Pesach, even a small bit of leavened bread that falls into a mixture render it forbidden, whether it mixed with the same type of substance or into a different type of substance. That's the Rabbah's ruling. Last halacha of today, chametz shelo bizmano. The halacha with regard to a mixture containing leavened bread at the time that it's not Pesach, either before or after the festival, is that the leavened bread is subject to nullification in the mixture regardless of whether it falls into the same type of substance or into a different type of substance. So the Tur said, as long as it's less than 1/60 of the mixture. The Shulchan Aruch said, that's the Ba'er Tev said, that where the leavened bread fell into the mixture after Pesach, the leavened bread can be nullified in a mixture so long as its permitted substance constitutes a majority of the mixture. And that's again Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 447.